In the twilight of a war that had engulfed the world, a pivotal moment approached. The year was 1945, and the Pacific theater of World War II had become a grueling test of endurance and sacrifice. The Allied forces, battered but resolute, had inched closer to Japan, each island conquest a bloody testament to their determination. Yet the cost was staggering. The names Iwo Jima and Okinawa were etched into memory as symbols of unimaginable ferocity and loss. Amidst this relentless conflict, a shadowy, unprecedented scientific endeavor was unfolding far from the battlefields. Known only to a select few, the Manhattan Project had mobilized the era's greatest scientific minds under a shroud of secrecy. Their mission? To harness the atom's power and forge a weapon capable of ending the war. For years, they toiled in hidden laboratories, driven by a potent mix of fear and ambition. Then in the summer of 1945, their work culminated in a blinding flash over the New Mexico desert. The first atomic bomb test, the Trinity explosion, heralded a new epoch of destructive capability. With this awe-inspiring and terrifying breakthrough, the Allied leaders faced a grim choice. As Japan remained defiant despite Germany's surrender, the question loomed: invade and risk catastrophic casualties, or deploy this new, apocalyptic weapon? President Truman, wrestling with the weight of his decision, authorized the use of the atomic bomb to compel Japan's surrender. Welcome back to Compelling History. Today we'll be continuing our 4-episode series on flashpoints throughout history with a horrifying event which shocked the world, a moment so impactful it established a new world order. Before we discuss the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes. We'll link our Inflection Points playlist below so you can get caught up with the other episodes in the series. In the depths of World War II, the Pacific theater had become a crucible of relentless conflict. The war had raged for years, with the Allied forces inching towards victory, but at an enormous cost. The island-hopping campaign had brought American forces closer to Japan, but each step was fiercely contested, and the casualties were mounting. The bloody battles of Iwo Jima and Okinawa in early 1945 had shown the ferocity with which the Japanese military would defend their homeland, leading many to fear an invasion of Japan would result in catastrophic loss of life. By 1945, the Pacific War between the Empire of Japan and the Allies had entered its 4th year. Most Japanese military units fought fiercely, resulting in high costs for the Allied victory. American battle casualties reached an all-time monthly high of 88,000 in December 1944 due to the German Ardennes offensive, contributing to the total U.S. casualties in World War II, which reached 1.25 million, including nearly 1 million in the last year of the war alone. This war weariness was palpable among the American public, who demanded the return of long-serving servicemen and were frustrated by the continued high casualties. Amidst this backdrop of unyielding warfare, a secretive and unprecedented scientific endeavor was unfolding. The Manhattan Project, as it was known, was an enormous and clandestine effort by the United States to develop an atomic bomb. Initiated in response to fears that Nazi Germany was pursuing a similar weapon, the project brought together some of the greatest scientific minds of the time, including J. Robert Oppenheimer, Enrico Fermi, and Niels Bohr. Under the cloak of secrecy, these scientists worked tirelessly in laboratories across the United States, driven by a mix of fear, ambition, and a profound sense of responsibility. The project's scope was vast, involving work at dozens of sites and costing over $2 billion, equivalent to about $27 billion today. By the summer of 1945, the Manhattan Project had achieved what once seemed unthinkable. On July 16th, in the desolate expanse of the New Mexico desert, the first atomic bomb was tested. The explosion, known as the Trinity test, produced a blinding flash and a mushroom cloud that ascended into the sky, signifying a monumental leap in destructive capability. While the scientists marveled and grappled with the implications of their creation, the war in the Pacific continued unabated. Despite Germany's surrender in May 1945, Japan remained defiant. Allied leaders faced a grim decision: invade Japan and risk immense casualties on both sides, or find another way to compel Japan's surrender. Plans for Operation Downfall, the largest operation of the Pacific War aimed at invading Japan, began before Nazi Germany's surrender. It comprised 2 main components: Operation Olympic, scheduled for October 1945 to capture Kyushu, and Operation Coronet, scheduled for March 1946 to capture the Kanto Plain near Tokyo. However, the predicted casualty estimates were staggering, with some studies forecasting up to 4 million Allied casualties and as many as 10 million Japanese fatalities. President Harry S. Truman, who had assumed office after the sudden death of Franklin D. Roosevelt, faced the harrowing decision. After consulting with his military advisors and weighing the potential loss of life from an invasion, Truman authorized the use of the atomic bomb against Japan. The goal was clear: to force Japan into unconditional surrender and bring an end to the conflict. On a warm August morning in 1945, the world stood on the precipice of an event that would forever alter the course of history. The Pacific War had raged for years, but on this particular day the sky above Hiroshima was eerily calm, giving no hint of the impending devastation. Captain Paul Tibbets, a seasoned pilot in the U.S. Army Air Forces, had been meticulously preparing for this mission. At the controls of the B-29 bomber, the Enola Gay, Tibbets and his crew took off from Tinian Island laden with a single deadly cargo, an atomic bomb codenamed Little Boy. This mission was cloaked in secrecy, the culmination of the Manhattan Project's relentless pursuit of a weapon to end the war. As the Enola Gay approached Hiroshima, a city of military significance but also home to tens of thousands of civilians, the morning sun illuminated the landscape below. The bomb, which weighed over 9,000 pounds, was armed and ready to unleash its unprecedented power. At precisely 8:15 a.m., Tibbets gave the order, and the bomb was released. Down below, life in Hiroshima was beginning its daily routine. Children were making their way to school, shopkeepers were opening their stores, and workers were heading to factories. In the midst of this bustling activity, an air raid siren had sounded earlier but was quickly dismissed as a false alarm. People had grown accustomed to the sporadic alerts, assuming it would be another uneventful day. Seconds after release, Little Boy descended towards the city, and then in a flash it detonated approximately 1,900 feet above the ground. The explosion unleashed a blinding light, followed by a searing wave of heat that reached temperatures as high as 7,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Buildings were instantly vaporized, and a mushroom cloud rose ominously into the sky. For those in the immediate vicinity, life ended in an instant. Further out, people were thrown to the ground, buildings crumbled, and fires ignited across the city. In the cockpit of the Enola Gay, Tibbets and his crew felt the shockwave rock their plane, even from miles away. Looking back, they saw the monstrous cloud billowing upwards and the city below engulfed in chaos. The mission, executed with military precision, was a success, but the enormity of the destruction they had wrought began to sink in. 3 days later, on August 9, 1945, another B-29 bomber, Boxcar, piloted by Major Charles Sweeney, took to the skies, this time with a bomb nicknamed Fat Man. Their target was the city of Kokura, but due to poor visibility, they diverted to the secondary target, Nagasaki. Unlike Hiroshima, Nagasaki was nestled between mountains, a city of industry and beauty. As Boxcar neared Nagasaki, the crew prepared for their grim task. At 11:02 a.m., Fat Man was released. The bomb detonated over the Urakami Valley, where many had sought refuge, believing it to be safer than the city center. The explosion, more powerful than the one at Hiroshima, obliterated the valley, sending a wave of destruction through the city. In Nagasaki, as in Hiroshima, ordinary people were going about their lives. Factory workers, school children, and families were caught in the hellish aftermath. The intense heat incinerated everything in its path, and the blast leveled buildings, leaving a wasteland in its wake. The beautiful landscape of Nagasaki was transformed into a scene of utter devastation. For the American crews, the missions were a blend of technical achievement and moral quandary. They had followed orders, delivered the bombs, and returned safely. Yet the images of the mushroom clouds and the realization of the human cost cast a long shadow. These 2 days in August marked a flashpoint in history, showcasing the terrifying power of atomic weapons and signaling the end of an era. The bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were not just military actions, but profound events that reshaped global politics, warfare, and the very fabric of human existence. As the smoke cleared and the fires burned, the world was left to grapple with the new, harrowing reality of the atomic age. The bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945 left a world reeling from their immediate devastation, but the aftermath revealed even deeper, far-reaching consequences. As the mushroom clouds dissipated, the cities lay in ruins, and the true cost of the atomic age began to emerge. In the days following the bombings, Hiroshima and Nagasaki were scenes of unimaginable horror. The survivors, known as hibakusha, wandered through the charred remains of their cities, searching for loved ones amid the smoldering rubble. Many were severely burned, their skin peeling from the intense heat. Others suffered from acute radiation sickness, an invisible enemy that claimed lives days, weeks, and even years later. Hospitals, overwhelmed with the injured and dying, were unable to cope with the sheer scale of human suffering. The psychological scars ran deep. Families were torn apart and entire communities were obliterated. The bombings had not only shattered buildings but also the very fabric of Japanese society. Amidst this backdrop of grief and loss, Emperor Hirohito addressed his nation on August 15, 1945. In a historic radio broadcast, he announced Japan's surrender, urging his people to endure the unendurable. The war was over, but the pain had just begun. For the United States, the bombings represented a bittersweet victory. On one hand, the successful deployment of atomic bombs showcased the culmination of years of scientific and military effort. It demonstrated America's new, unparalleled military might. But the ethical implications were profound. President Truman's decision to use the bombs was immediately scrutinized. Some argued it was a necessary act to end the war swiftly and save countless lives that would have been lost in a prolonged conflict. Others condemned it as an unnecessary atrocity against civilians. The impact on the American psyche was complex. Many Americans celebrated the end of the war, relieved that their soldiers would be coming home. However, as news of the bombing's true nature spread, a sense of unease grew. The stark images of destruction and suffering broadcast across the world stirred a mix of pride, guilt, and fear. The Manhattan Project scientists, initially hailed as heroes, faced moral reckoning. Figures like J. Robert Oppenheimer famously reflected on the consequences of their creation.
I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should be his duty, and to impress him, takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that one way or another.
Internationally, the bombings marked a pivotal shift. The sheer destructiveness of atomic weapons was a stark warning to the global community. The balance of power was irrevocably altered, and the nascent United Nations faced the daunting task of preventing such devastation from occurring again. The dawn of the Cold War was cast in the shadow of Hiroshima and Nagasaki as the United States and the Soviet Union embarked on an arms race, stockpiling nuclear arsenals that threatened global annihilation. Japan, meanwhile, embarked on a long and painful journey of recovery and reflection. The nation had to rebuild from the ashes, both physically and spiritually. Hiroshima and Nagasaki became symbols of peace and resilience. The Hibakusha, bearing the scars of atomic warfare, became advocates for nuclear disarmament. Their stories, once of pain and loss, transformed into powerful testimonies for peace, urging the world to remember and to never repeat the horrors they endured. The geopolitical landscape of the post-war era was shaped by the lessons of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The bombings underscored the need for international cooperation and dialogue, leading to treaties and organizations aimed at controlling nuclear proliferation. Yet the nuclear threat persisted, a constant reminder of humanity's capacity for self-destruction. As the world navigated the complexities of the nuclear age, the legacy of Hiroshima and Nagasaki remained a somber touchstone. They were a stark reminder of the consequences of war and the profound responsibility that came with wielding such power. The bombings were not just a flashpoint in history, but a defining moment that reshaped the global order, challenging humanity to find a path toward lasting peace in the shadow of its darkest capabilities. Thank you so much for watching our video on the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you drop us a like and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the fourth and final video in our four-part series on historical flashpoints, the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Comment below what topics you'd like to see explored in future episodes. This channel is not possible without your support making it happen.